Hey guys, number one most opinionated internet contrarian here, and today I would like to take a little bit of time to discuss things that I didn't like in God of War 2018. It's a good game, so I want everybody to remember that nothing I say in this video is supposed to undermine the fact that the God of War 2018 is easily one of the best games to come out in the past, like, 5 years. And if you haven't played it, you definitely owe it to yourself too. It's really, really good. There are only 2 games on the PS4 that I would consider system sellers, and it's this and Bloodborne. And Bloodborne is my favorite game, so you know that's pretty high praise right there. So I'm gonna pretty much rant, unscripted, about things that I thought didn't really add to the game, things that I thought were kind of stupid, and things that I thought should be improved on. And if I ramble too much or what I'm saying isn't interesting anymore, then I'll cut, and you'll never know because I'll make it seamless. So the first thing I want to talk about is the parry system, because it's pretty stupid. The parry system in the game, it's completely risk-free, but it's a really high reward. There's no skill involved, generally speaking, because you can just hit the block button at any given time, and you'll either parry, or you'll block, or you'll miss. Because the parry button and the block button are the same, then there's no risk involved, because if you miss the parry, if you get hit, you would have gotten hit anyway. And if you block, then you just block. There's no mistiming a parry is not an issue ever. In a game, maybe, that has a better parry system, like, for example, and I don't love making this comparison because everyone in history compares everything to Dark Souls, but Dark Souls' parry system makes a little bit more sense. There's a little bit more risk involved, you know? Because the parry button and the block button are 2 different buttons. So if you miss a parry, you're vulnerable for a while. It doesn't double as a block. If you get hit during a parry, you take extra damage. And you also need to have, like, a shield equipped, so there's a trade-off. And, you know, generally speaking, parrying is not just, like, the always option. It's the sometimes option, and it takes a lot of skill to master. The parry system in God of War 2018 is really just like, you block, and sometimes you'll get a parry, and if you do, it's just objectively better than blocking. And there's no risk involved. There's no reason to not try and parry every single. But the thing is that some of the attacks are unparryable, which I think in part is problematic due to the fact that the whole idea about some attacks being parryable and some attacks being unparryable wouldn't be necessary if the parry system was more skill-based and not just kind of like super easy, because the parry window is huge, and there is pretty much no chance of missing a parry unless you're really, really bad. So having attacks that are unparryable is generally kind of stupid, I think. And what makes this even worse is on the game's hardest difficulty, which is Give Me God of War, which I'll get into in a minute, enemies can level up mid-fight. And because what attacks are parryable and what attacks are not parryable are based on whatever the level discrepancy is between you and the enemy, some attacks can go from parryable to unparryable mid-fight. I mean, this only happens on the hardest difficulty, but it still counts. It doesn't really make sense in general that they named this difficulty Give Me God of War. It's like, what were you thinking? Does that not imply that this is the difficulty that the game was kind of meant to be played on? Give Me God of War, like, this is God of War, this is the one that you should be playing it on. This is the true God of War. But no, it feels like rushed. It feels like they didn't put any real thought into making this difficulty a true challenge. And I hate this phrase, it's mostly artificial difficulty, because all they do is pretty much go full Bethesda and make the enemies have 8 bajillion health. So you'll be on the first combat encounter, it'll take you like 15, 20 swings of your axe to kill one basic draugr. And that's not fun for very long, and it also messes up the game's difficulty curve completely, because the game actually gets easier as it goes on the hardest difficulty, because it's at its hardest at the very beginning when you have no abilities. All you have is essentially heavy attack and light attack. And once you start getting things like runic attacks and, you know, more advanced combos and things like that, the game kind of ends up becoming a cakewalk. And honestly, the hardest part of the entire game was the stupid ass bridge, underneath the bridge fight, where Atreus is being a cocky bastard and he falls through the wood and then you have to fight like a bunch of golems and draugr at the same time. I think I died more on that encounter than I did anywhere else in the game. And that was within the first hour of gameplay. The game only gets easier as time goes on the Give Me God of War difficulty, and that is obviously really bad game design. One of the other things that really soured the experience for me was the FOV of the game. I mean, obviously, they've said it in multiple interviews that they were going for a really cinematic, like one shot, one take kind of movie feel for this game. And for the most part, they do accomplish it. It's pretty good. It is very immersive. It really gives you that cinematic feeling, but unfortunately, it's at the sacrifice of gameplay elements that I don't think were worth it. The game never can put as many enemies on screen as they could in the previous God of War games, of which I've played every single last one, except the PSP ones, of course, because they're... who the fuck has a I don't have a PSP. Man, what am I, rich? I was 2007... Anyway. They don't get to put as many enemies on screen because your camera's severely restricted, and they try and kind of compensate for this with this little indicator that's around you that tells you when enemies are going to hit you, but that's a pretty poor consolation prize compared to the really far pulled out top-down almost camera that the previous games had that let you take on massive swarms of enemies at once with huge cleaving attacks and big axe swings and chain swings and stuff like that. And that was a lot more fun, and that's kind of more what God of War, the essence of God of War was for me. It's difficult to make the player feel powerful on high difficulties in games because it's a very delicate balance to go between you're the God of War and you can effortlessly slice through hordes and entire armies of demons and also actually make the game challenging at the same time. It's a really delicate balance to strike, and I understand that. Only a few games managed to actually get that right. I can only think of maybe 3 games that simultaneously make you feel powerful and yet are also difficult, and those are games like Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising as well. Platinum is actually really good at this. But a lot of the reason that those games make you feel powerful while also being difficult is that the difficulty doesn't come from beating the level or winning. Like, winning in the traditional sense, not dying, surviving the level, is the secondary goal, not the primary goal. The primary goal is actually getting like a perfect score and getting S ranks and that sort of thing. And I understand that that's not the kind of game that this is. It's not an arcadey, video gamey in the traditional sense sort of game, but basically it's very difficult for you to feel like the God of War on the Give Me God of War difficulty when every single enemy takes 5 minutes of swinging mindlessly at them in order to hack off 1/5 of their health bar. It doesn't help that when they transform, when they level up in mid-fight on the highest difficulty, that they gain health back, which really makes it feel like a war of attrition more than anything else, and that's never a good difficulty mechanic. So yeah, those are basically my biggest criticisms of God of War 2018. The parry system, a little too easy, the hardest difficulty, a little too boring, and the camera, a little too close. If you can ignore those 3 things, God of War 2018 is an excellent game, and to be honest, even if you can't ignore them, it's still an excellent game, and if you own PS4, you should definitely play it, and if you don't own a PS4, you should buy one, and you should play it, because it's really good, and I'm sure you'll like it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.